We have to look at the situation in Asia as quite unique relative to other parts of the world. This part of the world is the source for the chemicals used to make drugs, synthetic drugs like methamphetamine. And so the syndicates that are really active in this region don't have the issue to source chemicals and keep the production levels at very high levels that you would see in other parts of the world where they wouldn't have the industries to supply them.
And what impact is that having on available markets?
Well, we've really seen this supply surge. It's been a supply-driven drug use epidemic in the region where we've seen organized crime groups really scale up the supply over the last half dozen years and at the same time drop the price while the region has been prospering. So people's purchasing power has gone up while the price has dropped and the supply has surged. So we've really seen this organized crime engineered drug use epidemic in a sense.
And where are the main markets in Southeast Asia?
There's several different types of markets. So we have within the Mekong subregion, we have a couple of different kinds of methamphetamine that are used. One is called yaba. It's a cheaper form of methamphetamine. And then we have crystal meth, which has really surged the last few years. And that's used in the Mekong as well now increasingly. Crystal meth is also really used in Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines. But of course, organized crime groups are after profit. And profit for them means Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Korea, kind of the near neighboring regions around East and Southeast Asia.
So then what impact has the pandemic had on moving drugs, particularly to countries like Australia?
Well, we've seen, obviously, crime groups piggyback on the logistical systems that are out there, the trade systems that would be in place. So they would be moving things traditionally by shipping container, a lot by air freight and through airlines. So we've seen some changes over the past few months in that pattern. We've seen increased use of overland shipments in the Mekong and then use of maritime shipments where people basically take drugs out on fishing boats, then they might exchange them with another ship. So we're quite concerned that maritime trafficking has increased as a result of the pandemic, as air traffic has decreased. Also, there would be a lot less use of couriers at this time, like people carrying drugs physically in suitcases through airports, more use of DHL, parcel post, and that form of movement. But really, land borders in this region are particularly vulnerable because they're fluid and they were always open. They still remain largely open, even though there is this quote-unquote closure.
So has that change in methodology made it easier or harder to police?
It's been really difficult for the police to keep up because a lot of them have been retasked or repositioned to address COVID. So we've seen a lot of the police, the frontline police, along the borders now working with public health authorities as migrants move back home, so they're no longer looking for the things they used to look for in terms of crime. So we're concerned that basically as they look one way, traffickers will push their product, their drugs, or whatever they're trafficking the other way. So definitely there's been an impact on the police, and we're not exactly sure how that will play out in the long term, but in the near term, that definitely we think there's a supply going by that has not been seen.
Of concern, there's quite a lot of movement through countries in the Pacific like Tonga and Fiji. Now, what sort of impact is that having?
Well, those are small societies, and they don't have the public health systems or the law enforcement, the public security systems in place to really police transnational crime. So substances like this can really have a profound impact on very small countries. Once an addictive substance like methamphetamine, highly addictive substance like crystal meth, destructive and harmful, gets into a society, there's special health services that are needed, and they may not have the resources to provide that. So, for example, specialized drug treatment. On the other hand, the transnational organized crime groups can be quite sophisticated, and if they can take advantage of these jurisdictions for their trafficking, their transshipment, even the local sales, but also money laundering and so forth, they're not ready for that type of crime as well. So, small states like Fiji, Tonga, other Pacific states, small states in Southeast Asia are very, very vulnerable to this.
And what evidence are you seeing that Pacific communities are suffering as a result?
We see that, yeah. Obviously, here in Asia, it's extremely obvious there's been an epidemic of methamphetamine use. Other synthetic drugs are coming into the market increasingly. But in the Pacific, we've seen many years now, 4 or 5 years, of increasing arrests and seizures related to methamphetamine in a place like Fiji. Some of it for transshipment, but some of it also for use in the country itself. And of course, that has a spillover effect in the justice system, the health system. So we do see that evidence already mounting.
You talk, of course, about just how cheap these drugs are becoming, therefore more available, more widespread. How do you begin to try and address this as a problem?
Well, we have to have first, there's a number of interventions that have to happen, but we really have to have first and foremost a rebalancing of the drug policy in this region. Ultimately, drug use is a health concern, and it's a public health crisis here in the region that has many spillover effects. So we really have to have a heavy investment here in health response, harm response, and prevention, because we've got to dampen the demand. These societies have been overwhelmed by this. Traffickers have essentially had a free hand to expand the market. So, of course, we have to do that. On the other hand, we have to get the police in a region like this to reprioritize their effort. They've been arresting a lot of users. They've been arresting a lot of couriers. But that has no effect on the supply, clearly. It continues to expand while they do that. What they have to do is focus on the traffickers, the gentlemen behind this business that are making the millions or billions of dollars, pumping out the supply and flooding the streets. So they have to really go after them. And that hasn't been happening. They've been having, as I said, a free hand to do what they want in the region.
It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on what's been happening in the Philippines, obviously with Duterte's very public and brutal war on drugs.
Well, sadly, it appears as though it's had very little effect at all. We talked to the authorities there. We talked to NGOs, treatment providers in the Philippines, and they all tell us that drug use is still at the same levels it's always been. In fact, we just checked before we launched our report on the prices in the streets, and they're exactly the same as they were before COVID. So there's been no change in street-level distribution and accessibility on the streets. So, I don't think we can say that it's been a success. And you see the impact on the society in terms of the violence, in terms of the prison overcrowding. It's not working out.
Jeremy Douglas, a difficult topic, but thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.